France is collapsing. ECOWAS is on its knees. And in the heart of Ouagadougou, the unthinkable just happened. A polished convoy carrying the president of Sierra Leone rolled into the capital of Burkina Faso, not in triumph, not even in equality, but in desperation. He came begging the lions of the Sahel for mercy, pleading for a return to the very chains Africa fought so hard to break. Imagine that scene. Crowds lined the streets. Soldiers in dusty boots guarded every corner. A young man named Issa, a motorcycle taxi driver, watched as the convoy passed. He shook his head and said quietly, "They closed our borders, starved our families, and now they want forgiveness." His words carried the anger of millions. For decades, the people of Burkina Faso endured sanctions, shortages, and threats of invasion, all in the name of international order. Today, the same body, ECOWAS, came asking for unity. And behind their words stood the ghost of France, the same master who drained African soil for centuries. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat at the center of it all. His silence was louder than thunder. In that moment, the world asked, would Traoré surrender to polished promises, or would he stand as the voice of a people who refused to kneel again? This is not just politics. It is survival. It is about bread on the table, dignity in the streets, and the destiny of West Africa itself. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes you will hear how a single meeting shook the foundations of France, broke the mask of ECOWAS, and gave birth to a question that could define Africa's future. Is this the dawn of freedom, or the beginning of a storm? Just days ago, in the capital of Burkina Faso, an extraordinary event unfolded. The president of Sierra Leone, representing ECOWAS, crossed borders to meet Captain Ibrahim Traoré. His mission was clear: to pull Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger back into the ECOWAS fold. On paper, it sounded like reconciliation, a call to rebuild trust and restore unity. But the details revealed something much deeper and far more troubling. The first message carried by the Sierra Leonean president was wrapped in the language of peace. He spoke of reopening borders, lifting sanctions, and restoring what he called the family of West Africa. He promised trade could flow again, banks could unfreeze, and markets could return to normal. To some, it sounded noble. But for those who had suffered the sting of ECOWAS sanctions, it rang hollow. Only months before, ECOWAS had slammed those very borders shut. Trucks carrying tomatoes and onions rotted at checkpoints. Pharmacies closed because medicine never arrived. Families went hungry, and fathers came home empty-handed. Now, the same organization that inflicted that pain was offering a hand of friendship. A farmer named Boubacar from northern Burkina Faso remembered those days well. He lost his entire onion harvest because the borders closed. "I watched my food rot while my children begged for bread," he told a local reporter. "And now they speak of unity? Unity with who? With the ones who made us starve?" His words carried the bitterness of thousands who still lived with scars of hunger. But that was only the beginning. The second message was far more dangerous. With rehearsed words and polished speeches, the Sierra Leonean envoy said something shocking. He asked the Sahel leaders not only to mend ties with ECOWAS, but to consider allowing France to return. Yes, France, the very power that had drained Africa's gold, uranium, and cotton for centuries. The same power that sent soldiers, controlled banks, and dictated prices. For many in the room, it felt like an insult, like asking a man who had just broken free from chains to wear them again, this time polished and perfumed. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Observers said the air in the room grew heavier. Traoré sat silent, his eyes fixed on the envoy. He did not move, did not nod, did not offer a word. His silence was the answer, louder than any speech, because that silence carried the memory of betrayal, of sanctions, of hunger, of humiliation, and it carried the conviction that Burkina Faso had moved on. Outside the meeting hall, word spread quickly. Social media lit up across Burkina Faso and Mali. Young people mocked the visit with memes and videos. Hashtags like Use Shark Never Again and Shark Free Sahel trended online. In Ouagadougou's crowded streets, a shopkeeper named Fatou said, "If they bring France back, what was the point of our struggle? We suffered too much already." Her voice cracked with anger, but also with pride that her leaders had not bowed. Inside, the envoy tried to press his case further. He argued that France was weak, that its economy was collapsing, that protests filled the streets of Paris. He suggested Africa could use this weakness as leverage to demand better terms, higher prices, more respect. On paper, it seemed like a clever strategy, but in reality, it revealed the desperation of both ECOWAS and France. Why should Africa save a master who never saved Africa? Why should Burkina Faso rescue the same nation that left its people hungry and poor? This was the turning point of the meeting. ECOWAS came with smiles, but their words carried poison. They came with promises, but their record showed betrayal. And Traore, representing not just Burkina Faso, but the entire Sahel alliance, refused to be deceived. His silence was a shield, his calm a statement of strength. The convoy that entered Ouagadougou with polished cars and diplomatic language was leaving with empty hands. But this was not just a failed mission. It was a spark, a moment that revealed how deep the cracks in West Africa had become. The question now is clear. If ECOWAS failed to bend the Sahel, what came next? The climax of the meeting came with a single sentence. The Sierra Leonean president, representing ECOWAS, leaned forward and said what no one expected to hear spoken so plainly. He asked the leaders of the Sahel to welcome France back, not in whispers, not in coded speech, but openly, directly, as if betrayal could be dressed in the robes of diplomacy. The room fell silent. Every cough, every shuffle of a chair felt too loud. Observers described the air as heavy, almost unbreathable. To many, it was as if a wound that had just begun to heal was torn open again. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the words cut deep. He had risen to leadership on the promise of dignity and independence. France had ruled over Burkina Faso for decades, draining gold from its mines and dictating the lives of its people. Now, when Paris was facing protests, debt, and political collapse, ECOWAS wanted the Sahel to bail them out. Traoré did not flinch. He did not speak. His silence was his verdict, and that silence was louder than thunder. Outside, the reaction was immediate. Crowds in Ouagadougou gathered around radios and televisions, listening for news. When they heard that ECOWAS had asked for France's return, anger spread like wildfire. University students marched through the streets with signs that read, "Never again," and "Burkina is not for sale." Market vendors, who had suffered through shortages when ECOWAS closed borders, shouted at the passing convoy, "Take your words back to Paris." Soldiers in dusty boots stood guard, but nodded silently, their faces hard with approval. In Bamako and Niamey, the news sparked the same wave of defiance. Young men painted murals of Traoré, Goïta, and Chiani as lions standing against wolves. Hashtags like "Dijars No to France" and "Sahel United" flooded social media. A teacher in Niamey told his students, "This is not just politics. This is history. You will remember this day." ECOWAS leaders may have expected negotiation. Instead, they faced rejection so complete it left them exposed. Their words fell like raindrops on iron. The people of the Sahel remembered too well the sanctions, the hunger, the threats. To ask them now to accept France back was like asking a man who had just broken free to wear the chains again. The silence of Traoré was not emptiness. It was a statement. It spoke for the farmer whose crops rotted when borders closed. It spoke for the mother who lost a child when medicine was blocked. It spoke for the dignity of a people who had endured too much to be deceived again. The international press quickly picked up the story. Headlines in Paris trembled with fear. France's last foothold in Africa slips away. In Brussels, European officials whispered about energy shortages if uranium from Niger and gold from Burkina Faso no longer flowed. In Washington, policymakers asked whether the Sahel was slipping not only from Paris, but also from Western influence entirely. And yet, inside the hall, Traore said nothing. His silence left the ECOWAS envoy with no victory, no handshakes, no agreement, only the sound of rejection. A young soldier in Ouagadougou later described it best. He did not need to raise his voice, the soldier said. His silence was enough. We all heard it. We all knew what it meant. This was the climax, the breaking point. ECOWAS came as the messenger of Paris, but they left stripped of their mask. The people of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger had seen through the charade. They knew what was at stake, and they were ready to endure hardship for freedom rather than bow for comfort. But as the dust settled, one question grew heavier. If the Sahel defied ECOWAS and rejected France, how long before the wider world decided to act? When the Sierra Leone envoy's convoy rolled out of Ouagadougou, the silence left behind was heavy, but not empty. It was a verdict, and that verdict carried consequences far beyond the meeting room. For ordinary people across the Sahel, the refusal of Traore, Goita, and Chiani meant one thing: survival on their own terms. Markets across Burkina Faso buzzed with talk. Vendors remembered the months when ECOWAS closed borders and food rotted at checkpoints. In the capital's central market, Awa, a mother of 4, said, "During the sanctions, I sold everything I had just to buy rice. My children ate once a day. If ECOWAS wants us back, let them first repay the hunger they caused." Her words spoke for many who had lived through shortages. In Mali, a group of truck drivers recalled sleeping in their vehicles for weeks when borders were sealed. Dozens lost their jobs when goods couldn't move. One driver, Musa, summed it up. "I lost my income, my dignity, everything. They said it was for democracy, but who fed my family?" This bitterness explains why the Sahel's refusal struck such a deep chord among its people. But the rejection of ECOWAS also created political ripples. By standing firm, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger solidified their new alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Unlike ECOWAS, AES is not about empty speeches. It is about survival. The 3 countries now coordinate militaries, share intelligence, and conduct joint training. According to military reports, more than 10,000 soldiers have already participated in AES drills. For the first time in decades, the Sahel has built a structure that does not depend on Paris, Brussels, or Washington. The economic impact is also clear. French companies that once dominated uranium in Niger, cotton in Mali, and gold in Burkina Faso now face expulsion or renegotiation. Contracts signed in secret are being torn up in public. At the same time, new deals are forming, with Russia supplying grain and weapons, China building roads and factories, and Turkey delivering drones and training. In 2024 alone, Burkina Faso signed infrastructure projects worth over $600 million with Chinese firms, figures that rival what France invested in decades. Still, independence comes with hardship. The sanctions have not disappeared. Inflation remains high. In some towns, families still ration food. A UNICEF report warned that nearly 5 million children across the Sahel face malnutrition. These numbers are staggering, and they show that the road of dignity is not without suffering. Yet when asked, many say they would rather endure hardship than return to chains. The political cost for ECOWAS is enormous. Once seen as the family of West Africa, its authority now looks broken. Guinea has openly questioned its role. Chad watches carefully, pressured by its citizens to follow the Sahel's example. Even in Togo and Benin, where French influence remains strong, whispers of defiance grow louder. A teacher in Lomé told his class, "If Burkina Faso can say no, why not us?" The silence of Traoré has become a sermon of courage, spreading across borders. It has reshaped not only politics, but identity. For the first time in a generation, many Africans see a future not dictated by foreign capitals, but built in their own soil. Yet, this independence also carries danger. Sanctions could tighten, foreign pressure could grow, aid could be cut. And behind it all, the question looms: how will the United States react? While the streets of Ouagadougou celebrated defiance, the echo of that silence reached far beyond Africa. In Paris, officials panicked. For decades, French lights had burned with Niger's uranium. French vaults had been filled with Burkina Faso's gold, and French industries had been fueled by Malian cotton. Now those supply lines were cracking. Headlines in French newspapers admitted what many feared: France is losing Africa. In Brussels, the European Union put on a face of calm diplomacy, but behind closed doors, the mood was tense. Without African energy and minerals, European industries face shortages. Winter looms with the threat of shivering homes and slowing factories. European diplomats whispered into ECOWAS' ears, urging them to hold the line, to pressure the Sahel back into the fold in the name of stability. Across the Atlantic, Washington watched with sharper eyes. The United States did not cry for Paris. It calculated. For American policymakers, the Sahel is not only about resources, it is about security. Niger hosts one of the largest U.S. drone bases in Africa, a key node in the war on terror. Military planners fear that if the Sahel breaks fully from Western influence, U.S. operations could be endangered. "If we lose Niger," one retired officer told a think tank, "we lose our eyes and ears in the Sahel." At the same time, Washington knows new players are stepping in. Russia has already supplied weapons and advisors. China builds infrastructure and factories. Turkey delivers drones and training. These nations pursue their own interests, but unlike France, they do not carry the same colonial scars. For Sahel leaders, that difference matters. American media framed the issue as a question of global competition. Was the U.S. witnessing the birth of a Russian-backed bloc in Africa? Or was this a genuine African awakening, beyond the reach of any empire? On Capitol Hill, lawmakers asked whether American aid should be tied to stronger conditions, or whether pushing too hard would drive the Sahel further into Russia and China's arms. What is clear is that the United States can no longer ignore the Sahel. The rejection of ECOWAS and France is not a regional squabble. It is a shift in global power. The silence of Traoré now echoes in Washington as a warning. The old order is collapsing. The question is urgent. Is this silence the dawn of a new independence, or the spark of a larger crisis that could reshape not only Africa, but the balance of global security? The dust has settled in Ouagadougou, but the consequences are only beginning. The refusal of ECOWAS and the rejection of France may feel like a victory today, but it opens the door to storms tomorrow. Sanctions could deepen, aid could shrink. Pressures from Europe, America, and international institutions may rise. For Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, this road is not paved with comfort. It is paved with sacrifice. Yet for many, that sacrifice is worth it. A father in Niamey, who once walked miles to find bread during sanctions, said, "I would rather see my children hungry for a day than chained for a lifetime." His words capture the spirit of millions across the Sahel, choosing dignity over dependence. But let us be clear, the risks are real. If the Sahel Alliance fails to secure stronger partnerships within the next 3 months, the danger of military intervention or further isolation grows sharply. If the AES cannot coordinate food security and stabilize currency, then ordinary families may bear unbearable costs. This is not speculation. It is the pattern of history. When nations rise against old empires, pressure always follows. So the question hangs in the air like thunder over the desert. Is Captain Ibrahim Traoré the hope of a new Africa or the spark of a deeper crisis? Will his silence be remembered as the roar of freedom or as the prelude to another storm? This is where you come in. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe dignity is worth more than gold, let your voice be heard. Share your thoughts below so history knows where you stood. If you believe in justice, in faith, and in a rising Africa, show your support. Share this video, let others hear the truth, and stay with us for the next chapter. Because this story is not over. Tomorrow's headlines may tell of new sanctions, new alliances, or even new conflicts. But one thing is certain: the Sahel has spoken. The lions have roared, and the world must decide whether to listen or to try to silence them once again. May God bless Africa, a land of strength, of hope, and of unbreakable will.